welcome to Unlock the Story. My name's Krystle, and I'm so glad that you're here with us today. If you haven't already, I'm just going to pause you for a moment because today we're bringing you part 2 of the conversation that I had with Val Lieske, who is the artistic director at Fire Exit Theatre in Calgary. If you didn't watch the beginning, the first part 1 that we recently released, I suggest you go and watch it. It's going to be linked here or maybe here. I'm not sure which one, but there's going to be a card up here. Click over, watch it, and then come back and watch today's interview. Now, like I said, this interview is actually a continuation of that conversation. That's why our last episode kind of ended abruptly, was because it was so good, but it was so long. It was too much for one episode, so we thought we would split it into 2. And I am so excited because the conversation just kept getting better and better. And the part that we're bringing you today has so much good stuff in there. We talk about Noah and how artistic license brings hope and longevity to our faith. I'm not going to go into all of it. Really, I'm going to stop talking here and we're going to roll the rest of the interview. I sometimes wonder, since fear became like the number one currency in keeping people in place within the Christian bubble, but like I wonder sometimes if people are leaving the faith because there wasn't enough true art to explain our faith. Sometimes I wonder, like, as artists that have faith, that believe, like, have we failed because we haven't taken up the mantle to be artistic and to take the artistic license to scripture in whatever medium and form we express ourselves. And yeah.
And unfortunately now we have a whole genre of both bad art and bad theology combined in Christian movies, movies, right, that are not theologically correct, in my opinion, the woman who goes into her prayer closet and prays, and every single prayer she prays is answered exactly how she prayed it in exactly the timeline. Like, I don't know which God you're praying to, but like I'd say the majority of my prayers have not been answered in the way that I wanted in the timeline. And so like, that's actually not, that does not show an accurate portrayal of, you know, what happens when you pray and your partner still leaves, your dad still dies of cancer, you still lose your job. Like, I'm interested in that story, that you did all the right things, prayed all the right prayers, and God chose in his own wisdom to not answer it in that way. Now, how do you live a godly life?
We read things and we tell stories with hindsight.
Right.
We see how it ends. We see the fact that grandma died, but look at her grandson that rose up to do such amazing things. And it was because of her sacrifices that he was able to do that. But like when you're living it, you don't have hindsight. We're just living it.
But we feel like we have to guard like God's reputation. Like somehow if we show him as, again, not abiding to our will, if he's got his own agenda, shockingly, because he's God, we have to somehow protect him and what people think of him. I'm like, no, he's just going to do what he's going to do. That doesn't mean we don't play a part in that story. But I think when we don't tell messy stories of doubt, of some of the biggest theologians in the world would admit, I had doubt, I struggled. It's at seasons of their life. When we don't show that just turns people off. There's no way they could come into a faith like that and live up to that standard.
Last kind of question I have, and I'm kind of changing it up a little bit here, because you've already said like that you're okay with shaking things up. You're okay with artistic license to scripture, to stories. I'm kind of wondering, what is your process, or do you have a process of evaluating like what is a good moment to take artistic license versus what is a moment where like just let it stand or let it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I have a process. It's interesting, having also worked within a church context. I can remember again, trying to tell, how do you continue to tell Christmas and Easter? They come every year, and you have to come up with some new story. And I remember how hard it was. And this was, again, many years ago. Like, here's what you can sort of portray Jesus, but to give any sort of body or even voice to God was super
Mm.
offensive. Like, how dare, it's idolatry,
Wow.
right? Like,
Yes.
how dare
Yeah.
you try to put a voice, like I wouldn't even show, I would just do like a voiceover. I'm like trying to find a British guy because God's British. So even that wasn't enough to like heaven. Yeah. So I had to choose the hills to die on. And I think, again, I've brought both the audience at church and even in my company, you sort of educate them and bring them along. And it's a trust even in the person of like, I'm not trying to be sacrilegious for the sake of that. I'm not trying to
Mm-hmm.
cause controversy. I don't need that in my life. I'm an artist, and I'm going to try to respectfully tell lots of hard stories. Jesus himself spoke almost entirely in parable, in story, almost entirely, that
Mm-hmm.
he took license and told these ridiculous stories that were not true, but full of truth. There,
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't a man who had two sons who went, there wasn't, it was a story. He made that up, full of truth, full of truth.
That's so powerful.
I
That's
will
so
also
powerful.
add, whether or not this is a concern to people, but I will add, here's what is problematic often in the church, as I've seen working and volunteering in many churches, of them taking other people's work, not the Bible, taking other people's work and changing it without permission. So
Mm.
speaking of artistic license, number one, not paying the writer, not actually paying royalties. And I have literally seen churches take a script and completely change it. That's actually illegal and sort of immoral.
Yeah, and it's so different. People are so used to taking like the mindset of what I'm going to do with Shakespeare and then
Right.
applying it to modern
Yeah.
playwrights. That it's like, no, 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 that's public domain. No, this is so cool. I love having these conversations around telling stories and what it takes to tell a good story and why, it's worthwhile.
Do you
Yeah.
see
And
Noah? What was it called? Whatever,
oh
when
my
Russell
gosh.
Crowe. Okay,
Yes.
so
Yes.
many things. So, but there was like some stuff like when the big giant creatures, those myth, and I
Hmm.
was like, is that I needed to go back. It made me
Yeah.
that I watch. I go back. I'm like, they're legit in there. These
Yep.
crazy giant things that we never talk about, but it
Hmm.
was represented
Hmm.
in this movie, and it actually made me go back to scripture and reread. Yeah, there is something beautiful about, like you say,
Yep.
someone who doesn't bring almost the baggage of
Hmm.
Sunday school stories. Of they just come at it as a pure story and ask the what if this, what if
Hmm.
that, which we don't tend to do with scripture. And then we also love to skim over. He is completely obedient. He is living in the center of God's will.
Hmm.
And at the end of it, he gets drunk and has sex. Like we sort of skim over that, and they
Yeah.
found dry land, and then he did
Yeah.
what,
Can I get
what exactly did you do? Like
yes.
to celebrate that you obeyed God and he saved your family. That why don't we that's not a scripture we land on and unpack. We just sort of
No.
skim that over.
When you start to realize the messiness of scripture,
It is full of
and, and
gratuitous violence,
yes,
gratuitous sex.
yes.
There is very little that is safe and fun for the whole family.
But here's where, for me, the hope comes in, is because when we stop trying to make it so pretty and actually deal with the entirety, it makes you go, oh, like there's actually hope for me. I may never see the results of, like, I may die alone because of my choices.
Right.
I may live a beautiful life and then screw it all up at the end. But in the grand scheme of what God is doing, there is still hope for me.
I'm hoping to end my life with a grand scandal. That's the plan. Like I'm just gonna
Even now, Val got a little document
yeah.
plotting it out.
That like when I die, they find my diaries and I lived a whole I just want some, because really I've had sort of a boring life. So I feel like I'm gonna go out with some,
go with the bag.
yeah, someone's gonna make a movie of the week about it. And
Val, I thank you. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you for the work that you do. for the both reverence and ability to say, let's see scripture differently. The fact that you're okay with artistic license and in a real way, because I think that is so important. Yeah. And thank you for taking the time to have this conversation with me.
Absolutely. Keep doing the good work.
Well, thank you again for joining us for this conversation. I cannot wait to keep diving into artistic license. What does it mean? Why is it important? Is it important? And understanding, why did an artist do that? So if you haven't already, make sure that you hit the subscribe button, follow and like for more, and share this interview. If something about this, it was impactful to you, if you thought something new, I want to hear about it. So make sure you put that in the comment section as well. And until next time, have a great one.